Right, good afternoon and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 23rd of August. Apologies for absence. Thank you. Record decisions of the prior meeting, is that agreed? Agreed. Are there any declarations of interest of any kind? Councillor Galvin.
Yes, Leader. In item 10, the capital budget monitoring, there's quite a section there on MDC, which I'm director, but I do have a dispensation from the Council Conduct Committee to speak and vote on issues concerning MDC.
Thank you.
I have a similar interest.
Yes, indeed, Councillor Doe. Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is Councillor Chitty, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. This is an important piece of work. Air quality has become an essential part of everybody consideration when it comes to pollution and the quality of life, and so therefore this is an extremely focused report. It has gone to overview and scrutiny, and they have made some recommendations which I think we can all feel comfortable with. It is a format that needs to be fully viewed by all, not only by this authority, but members of the residents as well. And the emphasis on Four Elms Hill is growing quite considerably. So there are a number of recommendations that have come forward as a result of overview and scrutiny. I do feel quite comfortable with them. I'm open to any member that wishes to inquire into any one of those aspects, but I do think it's entirely reasonable and we should have a thorough and interesting progress forward.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Happy to support this. As Councillor Chitty said, there is various sites that DEFRA had us put in, or they put in, where we monitor these, the amount of fumes and way we test everything. Sorry about that. It's very important that we look at this one at Chatham because it's a very awkward area, given the hill and the valley at the bottom and all the fumes rising to the top. And I'm sure it will make a lot of difference when we put in the relief road. And it's important that I understand the MOD is softening regarding the use of HGVs using that road, which, reading this report, is one of the main reasons why the figures are so high. So hopefully that will come to fruition. Overview and scrutiny mentioned about the cycle path that we have the money for and the funding for. We haven't stopped it, we've postponed it until spring next year. Now the reason behind that was we had an awful lot of build up of traffic with the work we did down the tunnel, on the slip road at the tunnel, and I didn't feel it was right at this time of year, and with hindsight and the weather we've had, that we had lorries and traffic queuing at the top of Four Elms Hill, because this would need a lane closed for a minimum of 6 weeks to put the cycle lane in for safe working. So that's the reason that we haven't gone ahead this year and we're doing it spring next year. So I'd like to put 10.3 in the recommendation that we will carry that out next spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Filmer. That will be 3.3, not 10.3.
Well, we've got
10.3 on mine.
on the,
3. All right.
we go up to 3.3, so it'd be 3.4.
Okay. Councillor Brake.
Thank you very much, Leader. And thank you, Councillor Chitty, for presenting this report this afternoon, which has in fact been looked at for some time now. And to me, it's very very clear that we are really coming to the nub of the matter and dealing with the issues. The one area that obviously I picked up from my portfolio, in fact, was on page 15 on background, where it said air pollution is associated with a number of adverse health impacts, recognised as a contributing factor to the onset of heart disease and cancer. Additionally, air pollution particularly affects the most vulnerable in society, children and older people. So really, from a health point of view, this is very good news indeed as to where we are, and I fully support the report and where we're going to on this one. So thank you very much. Full support.
Back to you, Councillor Chitty. Just remind us what you're moving, please.
Yes, the recommendations are 3.1. The Cabinet is recommended to note the comments of the Regeneration, Culture and Environmental Overview and Scrutiny. 3.2. The Cabinet is recommended to approve the Four Elms Air Quality Action Plan attached at Appendix 1 to the report. And the Cabinet is asked to consider the following recommendations from Regeneration, Culture, Overview and Scrutiny and agree a way forward. There was a fourth introduced by Councillor Filmer, which is...
It's to, that we will be carrying out the cycleway spring next year.
Spring 2023, and the 3.3 reads, should read the council is asked to note the following recommendation.
Indeed, I beg your pardon.
Agreed?
Yes,
Sorry? No, go on.
I'd like to make
go on.
just a couple of references. This is an important document, but it isn't something that has just happened. Air quality has been part of the work of this authority for a very long time, and obviously DEFRA sets the standards and wishes to see the conclusions of that. I am very aware how seriously officers have followed those requirements, and I think it would be really remiss of me not to mention the fact that they have actually had to continually change according to various different government edicts. Now, this is important. Councillor Brent mentioned about the elderly and the young. But in actual fact, if the air pollution is allowed to rip, it will affect everybody. Nobody will be protected from it. So therefore, that is why we have put a great deal of substance behind the work that we do. Having said that, thank you for your comments and move the revised recommendations as laid out.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Go to item 5 then, which is Councillor Ayres, followed by Councillor Potter.
No, it's me first, Leader. So this report outlines the outcomes of the consultation period agreed by Cabinet on the 5th of April 2022 to change 3 grammar schools from single-sex to co-educational. The 3 schools are Chatham Grammar, Pitt Grammar and Holcombe Grammar, and they requested the Council coordinated the initial consultation process and the subsequent steps required to reach formal approval. This report sets out the details of the consultation, the responses and next steps. There were 67 responses to the consultation, which are set out in section 3 of the report, with qualitative detail in Appendix 8 of the report. The formal decision to approve the changes to the admissions arrangement falls to the Regional Schools Commissioner, who will make that decision following further admissions consultations led by the individual schools and a subsequent business case submission requesting a significant change to their admissions arrangements. The Council's role, aside from coordinating the process, is to agree to fund the physical adjustments needed at the schools to provide the facilities for a co-educational environment. These adjustments will be funded from the Children and Adults Education Capital Programme. The next steps in the consultation process for the Council will only begin with the approval of Medway Council funding the changes to the buildings. Feasibility studies have been undertaken at each school, and the cost to make the necessary changes to the school premises totals 2.5 million, which should formal approval be granted by the Regional Schools Commissioner, will follow the Council's procurement processes. Should all approvals be in place, the proposals will be implemented from September 2024. For clarity, the incumbent year groups in the schools will remain single-sex, with the mixed classes starting from year 7 and then going up through the school as each year group progresses. The outcome of the proposal, together with adjustments to the percentage of the Medway cohort who can pass the Medway test, will form part of the Council's admissions consultation, which will mean that more Medway pupils will have the opportunity to access a local grammar school place. This will also help with anticipated longer-term pressures, which currently fall outside of the scope of forecasting, but will put considerable pressure on maintaining the current 25% selective provision. I therefore move the recommendations as laid out in 12.1 to 12.3 of the report. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you. Councillor Isles.
I don't have very much more to add to that, but to actually give my support to the proposals and the recommendations, because this will enable more school places, more grammar school places, and fulfils our statutory obligations in that process. Thank you.
Back to you, Councillor Potter.
Well, I just want to thank Councillor Isles for her support and to officers for working with the grammar schools and putting together the consultation process, and I hope we have a positive outcome from the Regional Schools Commissioner.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Item 6, which is the annual fostering report. Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Leader. I am pleased to introduce this report, which details the activities, performance and development in the fostering service over the past 12 months from April 2021 to March 2022. The report sets out how the service met the needs of Medway's children in care and establishes the work to be undertaken in the coming year. The report comprehensively covers the areas within the fostering service that adhere to 5 main objectives to ensure permanency planning and to work in partnership with colleagues across children's social care for positive outcomes for our children. Ensures that they achieve academically and have access to a range of opportunities of employment, training or further education. Also ensure that we listen to our children and care leavers to inform current and future service delivery, improve health and well-being, and ensure a successful transition to adulthood. In summary, because it is quite a comprehensive report, I would just like to say that progress has been made over the past 12 months and the service has delivered. But I would also like to add that this has been in spite of being faced with a nationally recognised crisis of recruitment and retention of foster carers and the related effects of the pandemic. The service has actively responded to these challenges through the fostering service review, restructuring the service and implementing a new reward scheme, enhanced training programme and the uplifting of the financial support offer for foster carers. We have also and continue to invest in marketing and advertising to support the recruitment of foster carers. However, we recognise that we are unable to compete financially with the national private fostering agencies. Looking forward, much of the work of the service in the next year will be to build on the progress already made and to continue the reform of the service to include developing a performance dashboard for the service to better understand the throughput of work and what the areas of improvement for the service are, and strengthening the online presence by creating a dedicated website for foster carers. The service will also further enhance our offer to foster carers by commissioning support from the National Association of Therapeutic Parenting. The National Association of Therapeutic Parenting provides useful resources, empathic listening circles, a helpline and peer support to its members. This annual report illustrates the extensive work of our fostering service and the commitment of our foster carers to ensure our children and young people are cared for in loving, secure and stable families, and also that our care leavers have the best possible preparation and support to transition into adulthood. I should therefore like to thank the team and foster carers and also connected carers for their commitment, and also to officers for providing this comprehensive annual report. I now move to the recommendations 9.1 and 9.2 on page 203. The Cabinet is asked to note the comments made by the Children and Young People Overview and Scrutiny Committee as set out at section 4 of the report, and the Cabinet is asked to note the Fostering Service Annual Report 2021 to 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brake.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Isles, for presenting this this paper this afternoon. I'm so pleased that the activity and the progress being made with regard to fostering of young people is something that I'm sure we would all agree is very close to our hearts. And it's not all that long ago that I was dealing almost on a daily basis as now a retired magistrate, but working in the family courts, that to see young people and families being brought into the courts to discuss these issues and to find solutions. And it became very clear to me many years ago of the value of foster parents. And the report outlines the fact that there is financial support being made available, which is always very useful, particularly at the times that we're in today with the costs. But talking to so many foster parents over the years, it became very clear that they effectively do this because they want to do it. They want to be able to give something to young people who, in many cases, have been disadvantaged, that come from a variety of backgrounds. And if in their way they have been able to give that support to put these young people and keep them on the right tracks, then they obviously believe that they have achieved a great deal. And I'm so pleased to read the reports, to read the outcomes, and know that not all is lost. There are people out there that do care passionately about our young people. And I take my hat off to them, and I'm sure I join Councillor Isles and many others in saying a big thank you to those foster parents, and of course the carers that we also have in the system, together with our officers here in Medway Council who do a sterling job. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Councillor Isles, for your report. I found it very interesting reading. I think it's a shame that we, even with the uplift that we gave to foster carers last year, that we can't compete in the market still. But it does go to show, when reading the report, it's not all about financial. I was very pleased to read in section 3.15113 about the foster carers that have come to a natural end of their fostering life, and they were continuing to support the young people that they've nurtured through to adulthood, even though they've left fostering. It shows what a wonderful people we have here in Medway that continue with the fostering agency. I just thought it was worth highlighting that point. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I just thought I'd touch briefly on recruitment and retention, which has been a very challenging area. I think we all would have seen or heard the marketing on the radio and in various publications. There's been enormous efforts there to recruit additional foster carers. The remuneration is a big challenge, but I think where we do make up the difference there is with the support that we put in place and holding things like the thank you event as well, so they feel that they are well supported and appreciated by the council. And at the end of the day, if we can get a child in with a loving family, that's much better for the child, that's much better for the bottom line of the council in terms of avoiding a costly placement. And actually, they may well have links with that family for the rest of their lives. And that's an incredibly special thing, isn't it? So, all power to your elbow, that's what I say.
Back to you, Councillor Isles.
Yes, I should like to thank members for their comments, and just turning to that thank you event. I actually attended that, and that was for retiring care leavers, foster carers, sorry. And it was amazing actually that some of them had been foster carers for 40 years. There was all sorts of period of time like 30 years, 32 years. Lovely couples, you know, really you could see their dedication and love that they gave to their foster children. And again, some of those foster children still come to visit them. So, you know, and that's what we want to get, you know, that's what we would love to achieve, because that is being a family unit, and that's what we want for our children. Yes, the recruitment, it's a difficult time in many ways, because currently, or it has been actually for a number of years, the children that we see coming into care, you know, there are so many complexities, and they're traumatised, and you know, it's a different picture these days to what it might have been, you know, 20, 30 years ago, when those foster carers took on that role. So we need to be able to nurture the foster carers and give them more support, if you like, and apart from the mandatory training that they receive, also the additional training, as I mentioned in my introduction. You know, so we are focused on that. We do believe in our foster carers. We you know, we've got a great cohort of foster carers at the moment, but we just need to recruit more, and hopefully the new structure and all the others, the built-in support around that, will retain the foster carers that we've got at the moment. Thank you.
Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 7, Councillor Golding, please.
Thank you, Leader. This administration has an ambitious programme of regeneration in our inner city areas. Many of these projects are very complex and take a long time to get underway, particularly so when it involves dealing with third parties. Whilst it's extremely disappointing when a project comes off the rails, it's bound to happen occasionally with such a large and complicated volume of works. What is important is to treat the event as a learning opportunity and to get the project back onto track as quickly as possible. The latter is now underway, and the recommendation at 10.1.2 will enable any lessons to be identified. Therefore, Leader, I'd like to move the recommendations at section 10 of the report on page 210 of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. I'll support that, and just a couple of comments. I note the overview and scrutiny recommendations that are set out in 2.2 of the call-in, and fully agree with the recommendations here, in particular 10.1.2, which asks the Assistant Director of Legal and Governments to share a report with the corporate management team. This is on the back of the issues that set out under section 2.1, so I won't rehearse those any further. But what I will say is that one only has to look at the size and extent of the capital programme, which we'll talk about briefly later on under section 10, and your members will see there's £672 million capital programme. We have delivered a capital programme of hundreds of millions of pounds across many years, and have done so very successfully. So my comments are, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, it falls to the corporate management team to go through that and to see where we can improve processes, because there is nothing that cannot be improved. And I look forward to their deliberations and anything they feed back to us, and I think we'll take what they say very seriously. Back to you, Councillor Golding.
Thank you for those comments, Leader, and you've highlighted the details of the recommendation at 10.11 and 10.12, so I won't repeat it.
Is that agreed? Next report falls initially to me, followed by Councillor Chambers, and I'll just draw members' attention to firstly the report which highlights the deliberations of overview and scrutiny on this matter. I must say that having watched the lengthy overview and scrutiny meeting, I will thank them for the time and effort they put into into considering this matter. Many of the issues raised were dealt with certainly mainly by myself in this room at the time when the report came through. Officer advice to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee reinforced much of what I said and much what was said in the original paperwork. I'm afraid the confusion about Appendix 5, Appendix 1B to Appendix 5 was not helpful, and that caused some confusion and some deliberation by the committee. But nonetheless, obviously it's I thank Overview and Scrutiny for their deliberations. In terms of the recommendations, as we can see, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee felt it appropriate to forward the matter to Council, which I personally found somewhat surprising, as statutory officer advice was strongly that the Cabinet decision was within budget and policy framework. And I note the committee decision, Overview and Scrutiny Committee decision on page 17 of the supplementary agenda number 1. The committee agreed to refer the Cabinet decisions to Council for consideration without actually saying anything more than that. So we could well be in for a rather interesting Council meeting when we convene to discuss this matter at a special meeting on the 8th of September. And why we have decided to bring forward a special Council meeting is because consultation with the public is a serious matter. This is an important part of the HIF process. We need to consult early and consult well in order to inform the decisions we will be bringing forward about the WHO Development Framework Programme early in the new year. So time is of the essence. In terms of, so I'll move 7.1a as written. In terms of 7.1b, I would ask Cabinet colleagues to agree the following, that the comment that to be made to Council will revolve around one particular point made by Overview and Scrutiny, which is on page 14, the final bullet point on that page, which is around an explanatory document. A member suggested that an additional document should be produced to clearly explain the key elements of the WHO Development Framework and how they will be funded, including current uncertainties and assumptions have been made around Section 106 contributions. This would assist members when engaging with residents. I think that is a point that's well made. This was and is an extensive document. The appendices that went with it ran to many hundreds of pages, and I think it was a perfectly reasonable suggestion that Overview and Scrutiny made that a short explanatory document be made available. And officers are working on that at the moment, and that will be ready in time to go with the report to the special meeting of the Council. So in terms of 7.1b, I ask Cabinet to approve that an explanatory document be produced to go to full Council when this matter is discussed in September. Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Leader. I support your proposal for those two recommendations, and I will make reference to the explanatory document and the need for it. I too watched the meeting on the night and saw members' questions and also the responses by officers, which are clearly laid out in Appendix A. To me, there is clearly a misunderstanding about the use of HIF monies and what it is for, which is for major infrastructure, and the use of 106, which in these will add to this work, but on a local basis, and will provide, as the development progresses, infrastructure improvements and facilities. But of course, that is over the 15-year cycle of anticipated development. So I welcome the suggestion that we have this explanatory document, and as I've said, one of the things it does need to clearly lay out is the what the HIF monies are for and what the anticipated use, not in detail, of 106 funding and any other funding that is derived from the development. And I would suggest that, that the document doesn't only cover those areas, but there are questions that people are asking and which the officers will know and which the officers have given a reply to. And it may be worth having just a selection, a sample of questions that have been asked, and these are the answers included in the document. But I fully support the production and development of an explanatory document.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Chambers. I had that discussion with officers, and one of the things that will be in the explanatory note is the need for this consultation to happen now and what the key drivers for that are. Is that agreed? Is that agreed? Revenue budget falls to me. Members can see the summary position is set out on page 214, and will be disappointed to note that at this stage of the budget monitoring cycle that there is a forecast overspend at round one of £12.5 million. It's not unusual to be projecting a substantial overspend at this particular time in the financial year, but that doesn't make it any happier reading. Colleagues can see that most of those pressures are in Children's and Adults Directorate, and if we read the succeeding pages, you see that almost all of those pressures fall in Children's Services. So this is something we've become used to over the years. We put in substantial additional funds into Children's Services on a year-by-year basis, £22 million over the last 3 years. As colleagues will know, we are judged inadequate. There are certain expectations made on us from government, from Ofsted, on behalf of government, and it is up to us to turn this service around, and we are having monitoring reports which are helping us to do that, and we will more monitoring reports to come, and a fresh ILACS inspection to come next year. So there's a real imperative to get invest in the service as necessary. Talking to senior officers, even today, there is some forensic work due to be done about the use of resources, and to ensure that we are actually targeting on the things that will make a difference to children in particular, but adults as well, and making sure that our money has been wisely spent, and I think that's the essential part of the budget process. So I won't say any more than that at the moment, colleagues. There's a fair bit of detail in the report, plenty of tables, plenty of explanations for members to mull over. This report affects all Cabinet members, all portfolio holders, so you'll all be familiar with the contents of this report to a lesser or greater extent. And I'll go on to move 13.1 for Cabinet approval. Councillor Doe.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. And in as regards the remarks about the overspend, I think that it is high time, actually, that the government realise the tremendous amount of skew that is going into children's services, not because we're doing it wrong so much, but really it's because we're finding out there are far more children in need than the system ever discovered before. And I think that to that extent it's good because they're getting help. But I think the corollary of that is that what is happening up and down the country is that if more and more goes into children's services, quite happy with that. But we've only got a certain finite pot of money. And unless the government is going to fund these services better and recognise that you can't demand high standards through Ofsted and then not pay for them. And I think that really, to me, is a mismatch. And I think that what is happening up and down the country is obviously that the non-statutory services, such as leisure and so on, are often being chipped away gradually to the point where the public is really suffering because of this. And I think that this is something that the government's got to grasp, that more money is needed for children's services and also, of course, for adult services. And I think that you know, we know we've got an ageing population. We know that we have these problems with children's services, which have only come to light, as I say, because I think people have been looking at this in a much more critical eye, and I do welcome that, because I think a lot of the children, you've seen very extreme examples in the north where, you know, where the service has not been conducted properly, then children have slipped through the net and got themselves into disastrous situations from which they probably never escape. And I think that we in Medway, I think, now are really making sure that we reach right down to the levels that are necessary to sustain a really good children's service. And I'm very pleased and congratulate Councillor Isles and Councillor Potter on what they've done regarding this. But I think that in general, you know, this is a wake-up call to government, and I think we've got to get that over to them. And you know, I think that if we don't, then I can see a situation rising very near. We're getting get nearer and nearer the edge, and the reserves that we have are being fully deployed and more deployed, and quite frankly, they're not endless. So I think that those are the cautionary words I'd say about this budget. Having said that, I think it's quite remarkable that all the other departments actually are now hitting their targets, which is not easy. They were tough targets to start with. We knew they were, and I think we ought to actually be quite appreciative of the work done by our officers here and by obviously the portfolio holders in making sure that we come out actually on budget pretty nearly, and I think that's pretty good. And I think, but I do think that children's services, it's not because we're regarded as profligate. It's actually because these services need greater funding, and I don't think that funding should come at the expense of other council services. It needs to come as a fresh injection of cash from the state.
Councillor Brake. Thanks, Howard. Well said.
Yeah, we're back in business. Thank you, Leader. Thank you very much, Councillor Doe, for your comments and your contribution with regard to what you had to say about government funding. But of course, both adults and children's services, we are subject to ensuring that we reach statutory requirements applicable to the people that live here in Medway. And I can certainly speak on behalf of the adult side when I say that the adult services team within Medway do a stalwart job to address every issue that ever comes before them. And of course, what has happened certainly over the last few years in particular, safeguarding has been very much highlighted within the agenda. The Kenton Medway Safeguarding Board, again, do an excellent job, and certainly under the new chairmanship, I've seen that Medway has had more than its fair share of highlighting issues that do come towards the Safeguarding Board, and this really highlights some of the areas of concern that we have and the actions that are being taken to make sure that people are being looked at. I think we've certainly turned the corner in as much as it's not all that long ago where a safeguarding issue was sort of left and neighbours, family, whoever it may be, seemed not perhaps because they wanted to, but felt it was probably best to leave well alone and leave people to live their lives out. But unfortunately, some of these the problems that were being highlighted, it became very clear that action was needed. And as a result of that, it's interesting to note that far more people today are more than happy to make a phone call if they're in doubt as to the safeguarding and the safety of any individual that may be around them. And that is something that we welcome, because after all, at the end of the day, we are looking after people, and we are more than satisfying the statutory requirement of safeguarding and adult services. Certainly the last couple of years with COVID, we have seen significant shifts on how funding is being placed. I won't go into too much detail, but I think the headline is that under NHS ruling, they were very happy to free up beds within the hospital, believing that they were doing a good job and just putting people into care homes and nursing homes, but with no consideration as to how much all of this was going to cost. And I hate to say this, Leader, but I've said this on previous meetings, and I shall keep on banging the drum until eventually somebody up above us does pick up on this and rectify a terrible mistake. That mistake being that the NHS were very quick to throw money at the problem, to the point that here we are today, left with sorting out a problem that was not of our making within local authority, in as much as that care homes and nursing homes, their expectation is life is, well, if the NHS can pay these prices, well, so can the local authority. Well, the message is very clear. The local authority can't afford to pay the prices that the NHS paid. It's not in our gift, it's not in our power, so therefore it's an issue that needs to be addressed. But in the meantime, we will do our very best to meet the statutory requirements of local authority, and I use this as an opportunity to thank and congratulate the adult services and indeed public health for the stalwart work that they have been doing, and I know will continue to do in the coming months and years, and fully support the report as presented. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Brake. Councillor Isles?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I would agree with Councillor Doe's comments in terms of the funding for children's services, because aside from our improvement journey, because we are in special measures in that sense, and that has cost money, quite rightly, in order to make those improvements, and we are still in the process of making those improvements to reach, for the next ILACs. The thing is that the everyday business as usual, there is the constant demand for children's services. And regardless of whether that you've got everything in place, it still comes in, and whether you deal with it in the early help stage, or whether it goes on to children in need and children in care, that demand is still there and it's constant. And in my opinion, we will always have that demand coming in unless more funding is given to be able to tackle the problems at source. So all I can say is that it costs an awful lot of money to run the children's services, particularly as well as with the placement costs and the market, the competitive market there is out there, and we have to deal with that. But I'm confident that we will continue on our improvement journey, make those improvements, and deliver a first-class service. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, colleagues, for comments. I think that the comments that Councillor Doe made about other areas of the council coming in on budget or very close to budget at the moment, and historically coming in on budget, demonstrates there's nothing wrong with our approach to budget setting. What the report does demonstrate is the extreme volatility in social care, and I think that's evidenced on page 216 the section report on children's services, and you can see that in February of the year we set a budget of 56.9 million, which was before we had the outturn for the year, and the outturn actually exceeded that, as you can see, by almost £3 million. So we were behind the 8 ball to start with, and that's just a reflection of the volatility of that area of service. But as Councillor Isles said, we'll battle on with it. We have a statutory duty, we have a moral duty as well. Obviously, it goes without saying, but I'll just say it anyway, to make sure we provide services for the for all of our people, and the vulnerable people in particular, and that's what we will continue to do. So move the recommendations. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. I'll go on to item 10, which falls to me, which is the capital budget monitoring, and I'll move the recommendations if I can find them. Beg your pardon, colleagues. Yes, thank you. Thank you. On page 249, section 14, which asks us to note the outcome of the first round of monitoring, which I'll come back to in a moment, and to recommend to Council some additions which are set out under 14.2, and all of those conditions are worthy, absolutely essential. It does include the removal of uncommitted balance of the Regeneration Investment Fund, which is the fourth bullet point of 14.2. That's a finance tidying up exercise, and it doesn't constrain us in any way in investing in regeneration or projects or other projects as they come through, which will all be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And of course that is will be funded by borrowing in any event. So I referred earlier in the meeting to the extent of the capital programme, and table 1 on page 228 shows that the programme actually now stands at almost £673 million, which is an absolutely massive figure, isn't it? And the reasons for that are set out clearly in the report. Most of that falls under the Regeneration, Culture and Environment Directorate, which includes the HIF programme and a whole range of other initiatives. And I'm quite pleased with this report in as much as how it sets out how most of the major expenditure will be carried out directorate by directorate and division by division. I think that's quite comprehensive. It's very much to be welcome. I don't think it leaves members or indeed the public, if they choose to read it, in any doubt on what we're spending our money on and why. And there are many regeneration schemes there, including the HIF programme, including the Innovation Park Medway, and many others. And of course, notwithstanding the declarations of interest that don't inhibit members anyway, the substantial expenditure from Medway Development Company, which starts there on page 241, and which is doing so much to change the face of Medway for the better. So move their recommendations. Go to you, Councillor Doe.
I'm happy to support that, and I think I really do appeal to anyone who sees these papers to really have a look at the as I know all the cabinet members have, at the sheer range of the schemes that we're covering with this capital budget. And where I think all councils are going to be quite vulnerable, obviously, is if there is widespread inflation, then I think that is going to mean that we're going to have to be extremely careful with our tactics about it. It means we'll have to forward buy, for example, as much as we can. It means that we're going to find that prices from outside rise significantly. And I think that it is very difficult, I think, to imagine that that can happen for all councils without some kind of response from the government. And again, I think it is going to need that response very desperately, because if we don't get it, then I think you are in the realm then of having serious problems with a capital programme of this size. And of course it knocks onto the revenue as well, right across the piece. But I think actually the control of costs that's shown in here, and also the ambition scale of what is shown here, I think is quite astonishing. And I think the great thing about the capital programme is that I think in many other areas, or some other areas, councils have been criticised because they sort of bit off more than they can chew in terms of speculative development. Our development is not speculative. Our development is targeted. And I think that's the difference. You know, we don't just pick up the building because it happens to be on the market and think we like to do something nice with it. What we're doing is we're actually making sure that all that we do has a relevance to each other, so that it makes the centre work better. It takes account of the changing tastes of people within, for example, high streets and so on. And that is why I think, and something which I know probably Councillor Jarrett's too modest to acknowledge, that we've actually done tremendously well in getting money from the government. And the reason why we do that is because all our schemes, or most of the schemes here, are all related to each other in that sense. So they're not just simply taking a flyer at something that looks nice on the horizon. They are the essential building blocks of a changing community. And I think that's very important. So I'm very happy to second this. I do commend the way in which the portfolio holders and officers have kept these costs actually within reason, because it is very difficult to manage budgets these days. And I think that the actual scale of this shows, I think, that we are developing, as always. I mean, we've developed, we know, from over the last 30-odd years since the dockyard shut. Okay, fine, you know, but we've actually done better than that. We've now got to the point where I think that Medway is a major force in the southeast, and I think we should be very proud of what's going on. But at the same time, we need to stay, as we are, highly focused upon the delivery. Thank you.
That agreed? Thank you. Finally, we go to the council plan, item 11. Councillor Galvin, followed by Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Leader. For Q1 2022-23, our performance against target measures flatlined somewhat. This happens occasionally, particularly when annual measures are yet to come into the report. However, going through the report, colleagues will see that there is a lot of outstanding work being done, which I'm sure they would like to comment on. Colleagues will also have noticed that the report is now in a clearer format, and I'd like to thank Leslie Jones for all the hard work she's put into this. It was very pleasing to see in the People section at PH 23 that the Pentagon Centre has been awarded working towards dementia-friendly status. Whilst not directly employed by the Council, the Pentagon management and staff are working to promote the Council's wider aims, and I'd like to put on record my thanks to Charlene Malone and her team for all the good work they're doing in making the Pentagon a success. In the Place section on page 282 of the agenda, there is a snapshot of some of the work being done to drive sustainable regeneration in Chatham via the delivery of the Future High Street Fund and the Levelling Up Fund. As I commented earlier, all are very complex projects delivered by a small but highly motivated team of officers. On the next page, there is a summary of some of the work being done by the Medway Task Force to keep Medway safe. Sharon Adley, who leads the task force, has been very successful at bidding for Safer Streets funding. Much of this funding has been used for projects aimed at making women and girls feel safe in Medway. Before I hand over to Councillor Hatwell, I'd just like to highlight the work done by Hannah Rourke, the Council's employees seconded to the task force in organising the Safety in Action event held in Chatham Dockyard on the 24th of July. This was attended by over 5,000 people and was aimed at giving our young people and their families the information they need to keep themselves safe. As well as the blue light services, many departments of the Council contributed to make this day a great success. Leader, I'll now hand over to Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Councillor Galvin. On the risk programme, I'd just like to highlight that we've changed one risk this this review. We've moved cyber security back from A1 back down to C1. As you quite remember, we pulled it up earlier this year from C1 to A1. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is we've implemented a new backup facility which is on a write once disk, so we create a soft copy of all our systems, write it once, it can't be overwritten, so we've always got that in place at a certain time. It's not every day, but it does give us, if we do lose all our systems, a point not too far in the past that we can go back to. The second is that I think there is a little bit of a confusion sometimes between the likelihood of an attack and the likelihood of that attack actually getting through to us. And I think there was some confusion maybe with some people that we probably have got potential attacks that happen every day, but fortunately we've got systems in place that mitigate most of that. So that saying, I think to maybe avoid that confusion in the future, we're going to set up an exploratory meeting in September sometime, just to look at whether we could maybe come with a different way of categorising the risk and detection of something, maybe split it into two different camps if that's what we decide to do. But we are going to look at it to see whether we can make it a little bit less confusing for people. Thank you.
Any member? Councillor Brake?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the report as presented. I'd just like to pick up on a few points, if I may, and that is that with regard to excess weight, whether it be children through to young people in the secondary school age or indeed adults. Certainly the pandemic has had its toll on the community, and where it was discussed and the government would actively encourage adults, for example, to get out and do some walking. That wasn't necessarily the case because lifestyles changed. And people having put on weight, this is not something you can snap your fingers and think it's all going to be reduced in a matter of a few weeks. Basically, we've gone backwards when it comes to excess weight right across the community, right across the age range, and we're now having to start again and re-educate so many people in what is required and what they need to do to make themselves and keep themselves healthy, wise. I nearly said healthy, wealthy and wise, but that's perhaps not appropriate these days. But there is that opportunity, and one of the initiatives, in fact, has been the Medway Can, which was launched in May of this year, and it's a year-long project commissioned by Public Health, as is outlined on page 259, and it's been co-designed with a range of stakeholders and residents. It's been split into the 3 phases, and the campaign is focused on getting people to become more active and move around. And having seen some of the work that's been going on in the schools and with young people, it's absolutely incredible that there's no shortage of enthusiasm with the young people and indeed the teaching staff to make things happen. I was also pleased to see that Healthy Way and Man versus Fat scheme is back on the agenda. The Man versus Fat scheme that actually involved people playing football and walking football. And excuse that, I think this wasn't included as a pun, I'm sure, but it says this new service being launched this month will support 500 people with their weight loss goal over the next year. I'm sure that wasn't intended, but there'll be lots of goals being scored, I'm sure. But the other end of the scale, of course, is the smoking cessation programme. But I'm pleased to say that even during the pandemic, the service did not close. It didn't close its doors and say, we'll come back after the pandemic and we'll pick this up again. It was something that we were able to continue, and I take my hat off to the public health team and the work that they've done. They were always available at the end of the phone on virtual meetings, encouraging people and successfully encouraged them to give up smoking. And finally, if I may, the dementia-friendly setting, and my colleague Councillor Galvin mentioned the work in the Pentagon. But of course, much of this work is being undertaken with a public initiative, and this was directly from the communities, and that was the Non-Visible Disability Initiative, which is only into its second year now and making extremely good progress in as much as that it's reaching out to individuals who need that help and support, and equally reaching out to businesses, commerce and restaurants and the like, to actually explain what non-visible disabilities is about, such that people can in fact still remain and become active members of the community. Fully support the report that we have here, and thank you both.
Thank you. Councillor Doe.
I'll be very brief. I'd just like to draw members' attention to Appendix 3 on page 302, where you'll see the performance that this council ought to be quite proud of, I think, in preventing homelessness. This is one of the most difficult areas and challenging roles that the council has. We have, I think, managed to sustain the levels much better than many other councils. And I think that's through the dedication of the people concerned, and through the idea of actually, where possible, telling people how to access the market and being varied in the approach. And I think that is very important. The other thing that's changed, of course, is that instead of waiting for homeless people to come to us, we're out there on the streets actually talking to homeless people, some of whom may not even be ready to come off the streets yet. You have to spend time with them on several occasions, because I think most people who've ever dealt with homelessness, and I have for some years, is that actually as people become homeless and live on the streets, they actually then get less able to communicate over a period of time, until after a time they can virtually communicate with no one. And I think it's extremely sad. And I think that what we're doing is really a very, very vulnerable, very, very useful work. It's unfortunate that it gets harder the more you do it, because as the numbers come down, the cases that you're left with are actually difficult cases where there are often a multiplicity of problems associated with that particular person. But I think the great thing that we can give them is hope, which we do, encouragement to make small changes in their lifestyles. And I think we ought to really recognise the tremendous work that's being done in this area, because believe you me, it's one of the hardest nuts we have to crack, really, is that, I think. Also, you will see there that we've done quite a lot of work with making sure that we stay on top of the Ukraine situation, where people are coming to us from the Ukraine into Medway, and where we're making sure that those arrangements work wherever we can, and that there is an adequate end game from after the first 6 months and so on. So we're really working very hard on that as well, and that takes quite a lot of time of our officers. And I think that our role in that has been so far very successful, and I'm confident that success will continue. So I just want to draw your attention to that, because I think it's a very important part where we have rightly there a green status, but equally I think we've got to make sure we keep that green status, and it's never easy.
Thank you. Councillor Chitty.
Thank you, Leader. I just have one comment to make. Recently, we've seen a great deal in the press and across the media about malnutrition amongst children. And I think that, I don't know whether any consideration has been made in monitoring that, but I do think that there could be an argument that we are fully aware, if children across Medway suffering from malnutrition for whatever reason.
Go back to Councillor Doe. Councillor Galvin, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for your comments. And Councillor Chitty's comment about malnutrition, that perhaps that's something that Councillor Brake could take on board with his team and have look at. And Councillor Isles certainly see no reason, why we shouldn't have a look at that. Leaders, so I'd like to move the recommendations at 9, which is namely, Cabinet is asked to note the Q1 2022-23 performance against the measures used to monitor progress against the Council's priorities. Also, Cabinet is asked to agree the strategic risk summary as set out in Appendix 4 to the report. And finally, Cabinet is asked to note the new style of the report, please.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Meeting closed. Just wait for the recording to stop.